Well, it's a very long story. I want to keep it short, but um, I grew up in a town called Englewood, New Jersey,
Yeah, okay.
and which is right outside of New York City, maybe 2.5 miles from New York City, from
Mhm.
Manhattan. And there was there were a lot of great musicians that lived in the area.
Okay.
And that time when I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, we did not have all of the computers and uh, internet and those kinds of things that we have now, modern technology. So, the things to do were, sports, of course,
Yeah.
like a lot of sports, and you would either be, and as a child you could do go to the library, study, read books, play with your friends in the neighborhood, ride bicycles, um,
Yeah.
uh, and then the other thing to do was to play music, you know.
Hmm.
And so I actually, at around 8 years old, I started taking piano lessons.
Okay.
Um, all of my brothers and sisters, I'm the youngest of six, but everybody was like, taking piano lessons was like a requirement in our household.
Okay. Okay.
And my brother took piano lessons, but he switched to guitar, and eventually he got an electric guitar, and he's just 2 years older than me. And um, at about 10 years old, 10 or 11, I was about 10 or 11, he was like 12, and he started a band. Him and our friends in the neighborhood started like a backyard band, garage band, basement band, whatever you want to call it. And I really wanted to follow in his footsteps.
Hmm.
So, originally I was like, well, since I can't play the piano, we had a acoustic piano in the house,
Yeah.
baby grand piano, and it's sat in the living room, and there was no way that my parents would allow kids to come in the living room and practice, like have a rehearsal playing,
Yeah. Yeah.
songs
Can
from,
imagine that.
Sly and the Family Stone, or
Oh.
whatever, with amps and drums and all of that. That was out of the question. So because at that particular time, now we have like keyboards, like
Mhm.
that you can put in a case and carry down the street with your amplifier or whatever. Um, I couldn't do that. So I decided I wanted to play the bass.
Okay.
And so the one of my friends down the street had just got a bass.
Hmm.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna play the drums, drum set.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I started looking for a drum set, and before I could get a drum set, another friend around the corner bought a drum set.
A drum set. Yeah.
You know, so I was like, I really felt like I was being left out, And so one day I went to the rehearsal with my brother, which was just the 2 blocks down, and my sister had a pair of bongos,
Ah.
in the
Okay.
room, and so I took the bongos with me to the rehearsal,
Hmm.
and they were like, "Man, that's so good, man! You got a rhythm." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I started to play bongo,
Uh-huh.
and eventually, I have an eldest brother that traveled to, at that time, Zambia.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and back in I think it was 1970. And when he came back, he brought a drum for me, an ngoma,
Okay.
and
Awesome.
it's a little small drum about this big,
Okay.
from Zambia, and I was like, that was my first drum, my first hand drum, and eventually they, I got very interested in it, and my father bought, my parents bought for Christmas that same year, bought a conga drum for me, and the requirement was that I take lessons.
Okay, yeah.
So my father wanted to search for someone to teach me how to play the conga drum. And so he went down the street. There's two musicians that lived in the next block, about 3 or 4 houses down from us. And they were Marvin Smith and his brother Buster Smith. And my father wanted to find a teacher that played, that could teach me how to play congas. And it just so happened that their very good friend lived around the corner from us, about 3 blocks away, was the conga player. And he eventually, at that particular time, he had just joined the Isley Brothers. Oh. So my teacher, who played with Babatunde Olatunji and Larock Bey, played with the Isley Brothers back in like 1972. And he taught me how to play. He taught me how to play different African rhythms, Afro-Caribbean rhythms. And he taught me also how to play, R&B, soul, funk, whatever. And
cool.
And that's where I really started to progress. And eventually, I got another drum, and I had like 2 congas, and I just started to learn, and I practiced every day. And that's kind of how I got started, But, it was very easy because in our town we had the Isley Brothers. We had Wilson Pickett that lived in our town, Dizzy Gillespie, Sarah Vaughan, the great drummer that played with Luther and Aretha Franklin and Diana Ross, Yogi Horton. Yogi Horton lived maybe about 7 to 8 blocks from us, and him and Marvin Smith, that down the street, they used to have drum battles in his basement, and so I was surrounded by music. Also, there was other groups. We had in our city, we had a company called All Platinum Records.
Okay.
Which became Sugar Hill Records. They were owned by Joe and Sylvia Robinson.
Wow.
And so they changed their name to Sugar Hill Records after they put out the Sugar Hill Games, first record. And so we had that. We also had a company and a recording studio called Town Sound, who was like a guy named Ed Townsend, who was a songwriter who wrote for Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On. We had, and the jazz saxophone player Sam Rivers lived around the corner. So it was like so much music happening in our town. I mean, that's just a few. We also grew up with a guy named Roger Glenn, who was the son of Tyree Glenn and, the brother of Tyree Glenn Jr. Roger Glenn played flute and vibraphone with Mongo Santa Maria. So we had like a plethora of musicians. I mean, that's just touching the surface. There's so many more that I could talk about, and then so many more that came before me and so many that came after me. So Englewood, New Jersey was filled, Englewood and Teaneck, New Jersey was filled with music and great musicians. And so the level you had to be able to play, in order not to get laughed at or for somebody to take your place in a band or whatever. So there was always music happening. And that was a thing to do. There was like something that was not a requirement. It wasn't forced, but there was always something happening. So, I mean, that's kind of a long story. But that's kind of the beginning of it.